I brought this back yesterday. I think it's quite a lucky purchase. I know it's been standing in the corner of a field for the past 2 or 3 years and maybe longer. F810 with a tiller box attachment on the back. That's a rotavator in English. Co-starring Stinky and Porky. The engine, I pulled the string a couple of times and the engine is free and there is some compression, but the spring isn't fully retracting now, so I dare say that the spring has partially rotted away. Something that does happen to these kind of things if they're left outside for too long. So, just as I suspected, the spring has rusted and broken just there. So I'm just going to heat the spring beyond the rusty area. And bend it over into shape. And then cut off the excess when it's cooled down. It's far easier to do it long than do it short. And there we are, the repair to the spring is complete, so I can put the thing back together. So, I've emptied the petrol tank. I've drained the horrible old petrol out of the bottom of the carburetor, which has a drain valve, which is really handy. And now I've run probably a 1/4 pint of clean petrol through it. And the good news is then that the filter's clear, the pipe's clear, carburetor's getting petrol, and petrol isn't pouring out of the top of the carburetor, which means that the float chamber valve is working and stopping that flow of petrol. So, with the ignition turned on, it might just start. No. So, for the next trick, take a bit of that petrol out of the carburetor. It's a downdraft carburetor, which is really handy for this kind of thing, and pour some petrol directly into the Ventura. If it's a side draft, you use a syringe and squirt a bit in, and if it's an updraft, well, you've really got a problem. Let's see. Oh, well, it runs. And what that means is that there is a blockage in the carburetor, so petrol isn't getting through that carburetor. We'll whip the carburetor off and clean it and see what happens. So with the cover off, we can see it isn't actually a downdraft carburetor. It's a side draft, but for my purposes it might as well be downdraft because that's where I poured the petrol in. And the first thing I found is the choke isn't working. So it may just work, may run if I can get the choke free. So I've got the choke closed now, and I'll see if it makes any difference. Nothing. Now the carburetor's been reluctant to come off, so I've just cleaned out the float chamber. Obviously I haven't put it back on very well because the petrol leaking out to the bottom. I always find if you can get these things running for 10 minutes before you strip them down, everything's a lot easier because that bit of heat that's gone through loosens things off. So let's see now. Managed to make the choke work. So just put the cover back on. Try and drop more petrol down there. See what happens. It's trying. Open the throttle up a bit. Definitely a carburetor problem. Now there's a last trick before I take this carburetor off, and that is to open up the idle jet screw a bit to see if it's slightly blocked. But first I'm going to count the threads, the number of screw turns it takes to screw it fully in, so that I can have it at the correct setting if I do clean the carb. So that's just a half a turn to fully in. Now that is unusual. You normally expect 1.5 turns. So, having said that, it seems to be limited in its travel. Well, I've got the carburetor off now, and an awkward little beggar it was to get off too. The first thing I found is the main jet is blocked. So the chances are that the idle jet will be blocked too with this horrible modern petrol. So I'm going to see what half an hour in the ultrasonic cleaner does to it. I think I might take the jets out first if I can. See what... Oh, shoot. I've taken the idle jet out, and it turned out it wasn't limiters on it at all. The screw is bent. How on earth that happens, I can't imagine. So, the carburetor's clean, the petrol's on, ignition on. Let's see if it starts. Whoa! When I'm working on neglected machinery like this, I like to get it working and give it a run with as little fuss as possible. Don't do any more than necessary. And a bit of heat through the thing will tend to loosen things off, so it will make your job easier when you come to take other parts off. Which is exactly what I did. And the drive belts were all worn and perished, so they were going to be replaced anyway. The pulleys need a good old polish. And one thing that this highlighted was this idler wheel for the rotavator drive had seized up. And it took quite a lot of loosening. So what I've done, I've drilled a hole and tapped it, and I'm putting a grease nipple in. And if anybody chooses to do the same, there is one thing to watch. As I was saying before my battery went flat in my camera, if you should decide to do like me and put a grease nipple in for that idler pulley, be careful, because in the obvious place to put the grease nipple, the spring goes. Many people have made mistakes like that, including myself. So I've put a long reach grease nipple in, and that job should never need doing again. So I've just polished up the pulleys in my lathe. Plenty of other ways to polish the pulleys up if you don't have a lathe. And I'm fairly obsessive about putting a bit of grease on everything, screw threads and all, before I reassemble things, just to make it easier for the next guy. And I hope that next guy is me. It rarely seems to be. Right, so that's going back on. And when I got this machine, this was the arrangement. But it strikes me that it would do far more if it was under the belt rather than over it. Like adesso. Anyway, I don't know what the correct belt was, but this belt is a B53. That's a B section, 53 inches long on the inside diameter. And one of the unfortunate things about having tensioners or clutches running on the outside of the belt is it wears off the part numbers. But we can't do anything about that, can we? This is the correct main drive belt. Bit of an odd belt. It's not really a B section, but I reckon a B48 would do the same job at a fraction of the price. Anyway, the numbers are there in case you want to do your own research. This belt was about 25 quid and the B48 would have been a fiver. Driven from a Honda GX engine. GX anyway, but the badge is missing. 6 forward gears and 2 reverse. The reverse is very useful. Now I've used it rotavating in first and second. I found second possibly a little bit too fast. I've transported it round the yard in third and fourth, and in fourth you are running behind it. So in fifth and sixth you'd need to be a sprinter. Walk behind it or crank the controls so that you don't damage your final pass. Dog drive clutch to the tiller with 2 different speeds. You put the belt on the other pulleys for the slower speed. You can adjust the track by moving the wheels in and out, just simple pin fixings. To others that I've used, this machine is pretty easy to use with the handles offset. It produces a nice fine even tilt, and in common with all other rotavators, it brings the stones to the surface. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. We're trying to stone pick this, so in this case it's a good thing. It does leave a partially undug strip in the middle of the row where the gearbox for the tiller trails in the ground. But that's no problem really, especially if you do 1.5 passes. And so I'm very pleased with it for this job. It's just super. Divide the tiller blocks and make it smaller for going between rows and things like that, for which you take off the end tines. Simply removing the pin and pulling the things out. It came to me with a whole bunch of these replacement aftermarket tines, a bucket full in fact, and somebody has tried to replace one or two of them with nuts and bolts, and the originals are riveted on. So I think that's a job for this winter, replace all the tines when compared to an old one. Oh, I am delighted with it. It's an excellent machine and it's everything I need.